Good afternoon, legends, and happy Sunday. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Harder to Kill, where Coach Mick, Stuart, and I take you on a little journey each week with a different facet of fitness and talk about how you can make your body tougher and demand more of it. We've covered topics like work capacity, like breathing. Last week, we had a double episode talking all about sleep. And this week, I'm going to be giving the reins mostly to Mick as we talk about mobility. How are you, big fella?
Well, feeling a little naked at the moment because of the face, but yeah, otherwise not too bad.
Yeah, we've both had some haircuts with Movember starting day one. We're both looking a little bit less beardy, which is much more dramatic for you because you usually look like a fucking Viking warrior. How long's it been since you haven't had a beard, Mick?
When I got married 7 years ago.
Wow, that's a long time. It's a long time. What did I just do to my screen?
Put it this way, my wife is still laughing at my face every time she sees it. At the moment.
She's still laughing? Sorry, man. I'm just trying to work
she's
out
cracking
what
every time she sees it. She's laughing. She's not used to
it. Yeah, it's a little bit confronting. Sorry, I just had a bit of a weird tech thing happen there. The screen disappeared, but we're back. We're back. So the wife's... Is she happy about it, though, or is she just a bit confused?
Confused. She did say I look like a lizard face, so I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Hopefully she'll warm up.
Punches at the moment.
She'll warm up, mate. Give her a few days. Then she'll recognise you again. I'm running a little vote on my Insta stories on whether or not I should keep this filthy soul patch. And Dominica just saw it and she's like, fuck me dead. But it's better than monkey tail, right? If you guys are joining us, let us know you're here, just like Corey has. Give us a hashtag live, or give us a hashtag replay later if you're catching a replay. And you guys can ask questions all the way throughout. You can also ask questions after this has been published. So if you go through and watch it next week and you ask a question, tag either Mick or myself, and we'll get back to you. So if we didn't cover your question, ask it. Did you just do a little shimmy then, Mick? Did I see that, or were you just getting your bum right in the chair? You look like you were just...
Well, I'm actually standing. I'm standing on my roller at the moment, getting my feet a little bit of a massage working while I'm here.
Bit of foot mobility, multitasking. Yeah. All right, Matty Probes is here. Tash is here. Kerry's here. They're all here, the whole gang. Sean's here. Jim Bullard's here.
Thanks, Jim.
Matty Probes says, who's the young bloke you're interviewing today? That's Michael. You might know him.
Yeah.
Spartan Crypto. Jim says weirdo Mick. Cheryl's here. Dominique is here. Jenny Selmore is here. And Sam Ilsley. I think I said that right. All of the people. Hopefully you guys can see my comments. So I just got a weird little error message, which hopefully it's not a problem. But if you guys want to engage with us today, everyone already has logged into to be live. But if you guys do want to engage with us, so that I can bring you nice pictures on screen, just like Reese and Funzi are both here. Just click on the link in the comments there. If you are watching at the page, if anyone's watching in the Facebook group, hopefully Funda is. Hopefully you can copy paste that link for me. But I don't know if you guys can see that comment in the groups because I just got a weird error that I've never seen. But anyway, let's get into it. Nick, mobility. Where do you want to start, big fella?
Well, let's start with the difference between mobility and flexibility, because I know that's sometimes a lot of people get really confused about what's the difference.
Okay.
And stuff like that. Basically, it's simple. If you want to go the definition of it, flexibility is the ability of the muscle to lengthen in a passive range of motion. So this is where your stretching, your yoga stuff comes in very handy, where you're doing those big static holds. That's where you're aiming on flexibility. Mobility is where you're actively moving through the range of motion. So it's the difference between, say, let's talk about like if you're doing a Dorsey test on your ankle, how far if you like force it and are leaning and trying to get your knee to walk closer to the wall, that's a passive, that's a flexibility test. So that's how well you can push. But if we were to say, okay, now just standing upright, pick your toes up as far as you can and pull it back and see the range of motion, then that is a mobility test.
I reckon I could demo this like on the floor.
Yeah.
So let's see. I don't know. This could be a fucking disaster, but so say the difference as I understand it, and as how you've described it, is say I want to test my hamstring flexibility. I'm using my hands to back, right? I'm starting to get a stretch there.
Yeah, so that's a passive.
So that's flexibility.
Yep.
But with mobility, I can only get it to about there. So there's probably another, probably a bit further if I let it get warm. So there's probably another 20 degrees easily just in passive flexibility there as opposed to mobility. So hopefully that makes sense. Might not be the last time I'm on the floor this episode. Well, let's play it by ear.
Absolutely.
So why is it important that people understand that difference?
You got to understand the difference because a lot of people can be quite flexible and quite immobile, and then other people can be quite mobile and not that flexible. So, for example, with me and my wife, we are the polar opposites. She is a very mobile person. Like she can hold a squat very comfortably, and that comes into the fact that she's got better movement around her joint mobility. But when it comes to flexibility, I actually can do a lot more flexible movements like splits and stuff like that where she cannot. She can't even bend over and touch her toes, keeping her legs straight. Yeah, I can do the front splits quite comfortably.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, but that's the difference between like flexibility and mobility. There's not enough room in here for me to do it.
Cool.
In my little office. But yeah, so this is why, and these are great to know because when you're performing exercises, especially when it comes down to like strength exercises and movement patterns and everything, your mobility is going to dictate more of what you can do rather than your flexibility.
Yeah.
And this is why it's a lot of thing to work on, because you can always increase both, but when you focus on one area, it's actually going to limit what you can do in the other without having them both, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It almost creates an imbalance.
Yeah. It's the sort of things that like where people might be able to stretch really comfortably, but if they go and do like some heavy back squats, now all of a sudden they're very tight in certain areas, really fast. They just suddenly get really tight and it blows them up pretty quickly.
Yeah. See, I think I'm probably the opposite to what you're describing. So I reckon I'm not very flexible at all, but I'm mobile pretty much to the full range of my flexibility. So I'm strong up to the limits of where my flexibility ends. So I'm trying to think of a good like metaphor or analogy. You've got like your potential flexibility, and then your mobility is going to reach a certain amount of that, right? Should you try to be as, should you try to get your mobility as close to your flexibility as you can?
Yes and no. It all depends on what the task is you're generating.
Cool.
So let's take powerlifters. These guys are not very flexible. And the reason for that is they need to keep that tight tension, because when they are actually doing their lifts and they are lifting some mass load of weight, if they were to go in and actually go in too loose, they will cause more damage than that.
Yeah.
So their mobility is at a certain degree, their flexibility is probably a little more, but they are keeping it quite short because they need that built up tension to make sure there's no damage in the muscles. Just like anything else with health and fitness, just like training and stuff like that, when you're doing mobility and flexibility and stuff like that, you can actually cause damage that can go against what you're trying to do, like for the task at hand.
Sure. And I think you've got a fair bit of talking about video. I think that's a topic that we'll sort of dig into a little bit later.
Yeah.
As far as doing too
So
much
that's why
stretching.
it's always good to work.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Corey's just asked a question, which I would say we will we'll have a look at it now. Nice profile picture,
Yeah, why
Corey.
not?
Is there any quick recovery things to help loosen back up after a big event on a Saturday so we can repeat on the Sunday, or is that a question for another video answered in an earlier episode? So if you're talking like a trifecta weekend, doing a warm-up before your workout, doing a stretch session after your workout, rolling is, I would say, rolling is good unless you have a lot of inflammation. Then rolling can be a bit the enemy. One of the things that, like, say, the Bright trifecta weekend, the best thing is you just go and sit in the cold fucking river. Have a beer, and just sit there for like an hour and let the inflammation die down. So yeah, I would say definitely a big comprehensive stretch routine just after you've done the event. I would say an ice bath, a couple hours, or as quick as you can get in there after the event, or cold water therapy, whether it's a shower or an ice bath, and then if you can, do another like stretch rollout session later that night. What would you think, Nick?
Well, if we're talking like, so let's say you got the GC coming up and all that, best thing would be for you going into the beach and doing some walking squats.
Yeah.
And
because
you got that cold
walking
period.
Squats, walking lunges.
Yeah, so walk in there, do a couple squats, and just keep moving through, and that going up and down. Because
so getting the blood flow.
It's good to sit there and static. Cold therapy is great, but when you combine cold therapy with movement, so if you can get in a cold plunge pool and actually be like running, walking, squatting, or something like that for the legs, what that's doing is actually causing blood flow to keep processing around the body while also releasing those cold shock proteins. If you do just cold, it does numb the pain. It also slows the coagulation of the blood. And that can actually make it like you'll feel good because it numbs the sort of soreness. But unless you get that blood flowing, you might find next day you'll still be stiff. By actually forcing yourself to walk and cool down while in a cool state and moving it, it's going to actually help flush out those toxins. Because in the end, when we get tight and sore from a big event, it's literally just a buildup of toxins being released due to like the muscle fibers constantly contracting and releasing as well.
Cool. Right, man. And Corey said, trifecta, might have to find a good river in Queensland. Look, at the end of November on the Gold Coast, good luck trying to find a river that's actually going to be cold therapy. Even like the tap water doesn't get that cold, does it?
Yeah.
You might need to bring some ice.
Yeah, and that's why the beach would be better. Because you've got that current movement as well, it's causing you to actually activate different ways. It's going to really help flush the body a lot better.
Yeah, cool. Dora's here, Sharon's here, and Jenny, right near festival area. Apparently there's a river there.
Yeah.
Another river. All right. So anything else to sort of add about flexibility versus mobility? Excuse me?
Not really. I think that's covered it the most without going too geeky scientists with big, massive words and stuff.
Cool. I'm just going to film some stories as usual. All right. You wanted to get into, I guess, the anatomy and talk about some big muscle groups and stuff like that. Do you want to head into that now?
Yeah, let's jump into it. Let's talk a bit about what we're targeting with mobility and stuff like that.
Fucking make it happen. All right. Now, I might just have to work this configuration out. So just bear with me, my man.
Oh, good. All right. Flexibility.
How come it's counting you in?
That's all good. Okay, cool.
No, that's not what I wanted. That's what I wanted. Let's roll with that.
There we go.
Just let me know if that's big enough, guys. Otherwise, I can picture it, and I'll just leave Mick on screen and just the things, and then I can just take my shirt off and you guys can't see me.
As we're going into the anatomy, the other thing we talk about that's very different when it comes to mobility and flexibility is when we're doing mobility. And I'm sorry, when we're doing flexibility, we're actually targeting this bad boy here. So you're actually targeting the muscle itself. All right. When you're doing flexibility versus mobility. Flexibility is about muscle lengthening, being able to lengthen the muscle. And this is where like yoga is really good because it gets people to breathe, which actually helps relax the actin and myosin process, which causes that whole contraction and allows that muscle belly to stretch.
Yeah.
When you're talking about mobility, we're actually hitting it at this point here, which is the joint. So these areas here, this is where the mobility is. It's being able to move through a full range of motion at the joint point and stuff. And as you can see, like especially the shoulder joint, you can see right now we got a lot of little things going around in there. And this is where like people make the first mistake when it comes to mobility is they focus too much on where they're feeling their tightness. So a lot of people I hear, and this is actually me coming back from when I was a massage therapist, doing all these massages and stuff. A lot of people get tightness right here, and they come in saying, "Oh, my back's really tight. I feel like my back's just tight."
What's that? Is that the top of the glute or the QL or what is that?
That's the rhomboids.
Oh,
rhomboids.
Sorry, I'm looking at your little pink circle down the bottom.
Nah, sorry, this bad boy here.
Yeah, righto. Rhomboid.
Cool.
So what's pulling everything back and sort of down a little bit, but mostly just opening there. Everyone's sitting at desks.
But a lot of people, when they find this tight, they come to me, and it was one of the reasons I quit being a massage therapist because I could fix stuff in like 5-10 minutes instead of an hour, and you'd have people come to the same thing. And this comes back to a positional issue, which is mobility. And mobility is affected a lot more than flexibility by what we're positioning ourselves on the daily. So
posture,
for a lot of people who come in telling me they got back pain, a lot of people have this desk and they'd come into me literally like this, shoulders forward and going, "Oh, my back hurts. Can you actually massage my back?" And it's like, no, lie down on your back or get in your chest.
On that.
But well, the thing is, just like anything else, you can actually release a tight muscle, but the more you release it and that, the more lengthened you're going to get to a point that it just can't be lengthened anymore. You're actually putting it at its furthest end range, which is not a good place to be because you still want to have some elasticity in the muscle.
Yeah. Sure.
Otherwise, when you go to use it, it's going to snap, and that's when
we start getting tears,
and not the good tears.
So you're talking like if you take a steak and you start like eventually you're going to bash it so thin that there's no like sponginess in it anymore. There's no like give. It's just going to be a thin piece of meat. It tastes like shit. And
then you go to use it, and next suddenly you got a grade 2 to grade 3 tear in it, and you're out for 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Another thing too, like, you know, a lot of people over the years have said to me, you know, my back's sore. My back's sore and my shoulders round when I do deadlifts, and you know, you need to show me how to do proper deadlifts. And it's like, well, what do you deadlift for? 45 minutes a fucking week? How do you sit for the rest of the fucking, 167 hours? That's what's doing you the damage, right? It's how you're getting around on the daily and your posture.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. A lot of people who do deadlifts, because everything's so forward, they just literally can't stand up. This is them standing up. And it actually it comes from two things. A weak back, but also an extremely tight chest.
Yeah.
And like, as you see, you got the big chest muscle, and guys, girls, doesn't matter. You've all got this chest muscle, and you both have problem with it. So guys, you're always trying to make your chest bigger and nice and stronger without doing enough on the back. For ladies, you guys have a habit of, because you have breasts, you bring your shoulders forward to hide, and this causes trap issue, mid-back issue because of the constant forward. The muscles are all integrated, and that's the problem when people start looking into, I need to increase my mobility.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, let's release the back. All right, get on the roller, roll the back out.
Yeah.
And next, they've still got this forward momentum. Instead of thinking, and this is what I put up in the stories yesterday, I was actually really happy about this. My wife goes to me, what can I do to release my chest because my back is killing me? And I was like, oh my God, that is legendary. You actually thought of it outside. And this is where we talk about it. This is where you want to start targeting different areas, but not the area you think is sore first. When I was doing massage therapy,
where your trouble spot is or where the pain is might not necessarily indicate where the tightness is or the lack of mobility is. And you see this a lot. Like we were talking prior to when we jumped on with people with knee injuries. And often they're trying to fix their knee, but it's their fucking glute med or their lower back or their hip flexor that's throwing their knee out.
Absolutely. And that's the funny thing, the knee, especially with the guys running and stuff like that and all these obstacle course racing, your knee is just a hinge joint. It'll just go open, close, open, close.
Simple joint.
Okay? And yet every time people equate so many issues with like, oh, it's around my knee, it's around my knee. It's like, no. That's where the pain might be, but the issue is so far beyond that.
Yeah.
I see with runners all the time.
You want to find causation, right? So, and this is what I see a lot of people doing with massage, especially, is, and I know plenty of people who will go and get a massage every week, but they're not actually fixing their fucking problems. They're not actually fixing their shit. They're just going to pay for a massage every week for the rest of their life and hope that it doesn't escalate.
Yeah.
So
and that's a perfect example. You go into a massage, sometimes not. Some massage therapists know the issue and don't want to completely fix it because they want to still keep it. But the thing about massage is, again, it's the movement. Yeah, it's the pattern. Okay, there's no point fixing it when you don't know how to. There's no point fixing it just to go back there. This is why I got out of it. People would come to me with just back issues, and you're like, no, I've given you exercise, I've shown you how to do this, and that's what I love about mobility. This is all a lot of this stuff. Yeah, a lot of this stuff can be treated by yourself too, and it goes beyond just rolling. But even rolling even the approach to rolling you can do is completely different to what some people think they should be doing. Yeah.
Cool. Are we still looking at knees? Do you want to sort of go over the major muscle groups, major problem areas?
Well, that's okay. Let's start with.
I'm just going to put my leg up. Fuck it. Sunday.
Okay, well, you got the first one, which is normally typically we did talk about the shoulder joint and how some of the issues are the rounding forward, which then leads to trap issue, which then leads to also headaches and stuff like that, depending on people, how the severity is of it.
Yeah. And
like this figure is standing perfectly for it, shoulders back, but they're not like this. A lot of people, when you go shoulders back, automatically go up here.
Up. Yeah.
And one of the funny things is,
can you like bring your arms all the way up without like shrugging?
Yeah.
Like that's a good little mobility test.
Or even exactly activating the chest, so you don't actually get that thoracic extension.
Yeah. I'd say this is a huge problem too. Like most people walking around are all a little bit rolled forward. I've been working on it for years, and you even at the when we were at the Spartan boot camp a couple of weeks ago, I was just standing there doing something. You came up and you put your hand on your fingers between my rhomboids and grabbed my shoulder and just went, stand like, oh, thanks. So you forget, right? But you've just got to be fucking on it all the time.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the funny thing is, and this muscle here is one of the biggest issues.
Is that one of the lats?
A lot of people don't know how to activate that. So that's the serratus anterior.
Yeah. Which is one of your rotator cuff muscles?
No. Actually, it's more of your it more provides stability for the scapula. Because you don't really rotate as much. It actually helps provides with protraction and retraction.
Cool. So your scapula is the big sort of blade muscle, fucking bone there, shoulder blade, and it's basically suspended between a heap of muscles that all sort of hold it in the right spot. So if you have a big imbalance or one is way stronger than the other, it's going to pull your shoulder blade out of position and all sorts of shit goes wrong.
Yeah. So that is one of the biggest issues. And I find half the time when I go to people say activate here, they can't do it. They can't literally, when they try to squeeze down, they're like, and that is a week. It was actually funny when I used to work with a lot of CrossFitters and stuff. I used to love this because you'd have them doing their big clean and jerk snatches and all that stuff. I'd give them a test, just trying to activate this muscle by doing a lateral raise, like lying down on the side and just raising across over their head. They peaked at 5 reps on a 1 kilo dumbbell. Most of them would just be sweating bullets trying to perform it. And that. And
there's
it was always fun for me because it's like
so much more to fitness than just throwing fucking weight around.
Absolutely. And this is a perfect example of instabilities. We work on such bigger muscles, but it's actually when you work on the finer muscles, they create better stability, which gives you more power for your bigger prime movers.
Cool.
So the big show, and that's why I always love this one. And so a good exercise I always tell people to see if they can activate it is squeeze your shoulders down. Like you don't even have to worry about pulling them back. Just squeeze your shoulders down to your pockets. And you'll feel how much that activates, but then how much naturally the chest suddenly pops out.
Are we talking like you're retracting, so you're pulling your shoulder blades down?
You're just pulling your shoulders down. You're just trying to pull your shoulders down to your pockets. You just want to say, okay.
So I say,
even if you have
like
your hands,
if people are deadlifting or something, I say try and put your shoulder blades in your back jean pockets.
Yeah.
And that's sort of a cue that I give them to sort of roll their shoulders back, so that you're not.
And this is just and this is the cue I just give people to actually, when they're standing, it's literally like, squeeze them down. Because as soon as you say squeeze them back, everyone does this.
Just trying
everyone
to cross my
sort of shrugs like that.
Yeah.
And cramping is another example of mobility issues as well, because when it's held a fixed position, it's being overworked. And then that range of motion can be quite stuck. And then when you try to move it, it might not like it, and that causes cramps. I mean, I know I've had an issue sometimes after a big long run when I haven't given my ankles the right mobility to recover from. I've had a cramp that night because it's just been locked in a position. Then I've tried to move and it's like, whoop.
Calf cramp?
Oh yeah, nothing worse than a calf cramp when you're sleeping.
Yeah. I get like the worst calf cramps and honey cramps. Yeah. I've actually got the it's only if I do like a big day and I don't take the right electrolytes. You know what? I don't usually get it during events. I get it during like big training runs or huge boot camps or something that I run, because that's when I'm not so on top of my nutrition. And then I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I'll go, fuck. And I've got that like a cramp fix next to the bed. It's fucking mint. Yeah. Corey just asked, man, I get heaps of pain. Sorry, buddy. We're on a bit of a delay. Corey said I get heaps of pain in the front top of my delts and traps. What could help release this?
So we'll go more into it, but basically two things, and this is where people get worried about the mobility. They're too busy focusing on the releasing. They're not working on the strengthening.
So strengthen and lengthen. I mean, just lengthen.
Yeah. Now, a good release is actually getting some trigger point into the chest. So let me just. So one big issue here you'll find is this one here. Your pec minor will be actually pulling down, because in the end, it also comes down to where insertion, like where they start, where they go to, and origin, where they start. The insertion point, which is this bad boy here, can be causing that pull, which is then causing that irritation in the joint, especially on that frontal area.
One of these little fucking devil balls.
Yeah, one of those devil balls, but even actually a kettlebell. So the handle of the kettlebell is actually really good. And again, back to what I was getting my wife to do, one exercise I was getting her on my stories the other day was she was lying on a kettlebell, having it into her chest, arm out to the side, and was actually lying down, going back and tucking it all the way behind. Now, this is a great exercise because Gravity is providing the force onto the kettlebell.
Yeah.
But
I might even go grab a kettlebell and
yeah.
And I can do some floor work here.
Yeah.
So
but
we
why
can
would grab?
I'm gonna take my headphones out. You guys just
using the
amuse
kettlebell
yourselves.
as a gravity. Yeah, I got it. So using the kettlebell handle and using gravity on it is causing like a trigger point. It's no different than when you're getting a deep tissue into that point. Just the only difference is you get to control how sadistic it is instead of having some bastard like me grabbing, getting under that muscle and just really going to town on you. And then because she was actually activating and holding her hand up off the ground, that was actually causing her to be strengthening her back. So her back's actually working through that range of motion. And when you actually do mobility, you don't want to have it just fixed. You want to work that muscle through its range of motion, because then that's creating blood flow. That's creating movement.
I'm back.
So when you create movement, it actually helps with the mobility. And that's the difference, whereas static stretching won't.
What did I miss there, Mick?
I was saying how when you do mobility, you want to actually move through the movement, because then that actually lets your body register its newfound motion rather than just being quite static about it.
Cool. That's why I like yoga with like a real strength element to it, as opposed to just your stretchy bendy yoga.
Perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's get on the floor. So I was just going to demo what I saw on your story.
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
Love
Let's
it.
roll with that. Very interactive, harder to kill today. So we've got a barbell here. That'll pretty much do the job.
Yep.
Just trying to work out my angles. So
You're
what
good.
I'm going to do is I'm just going to lie with the handle just across the sort of insertion point there of the chest and sort of where the delts.
Yep.
The front of the anterior delt.
There we go.
So, I don't know if you can see, but basically I'm just letting that pressure get out of my way, chair.
Yep.
Just letting that work on that trigger point while I sort of move the muscles over. It's sort of like flossing.
Yeah. And now another way you can actually increase that is take your hand from behind your head, and then when you come back down, put it all the way up behind your back, doing the same motion. This is going to actually involve some rotational aspects, which is then going to hit way more of the muscles. So bring it all the way in, tuck in the hand. There we go, all the way behind your back, up behind your back.
Yeah, that was about it.
Yeah. So now, because we've actually added more motion, we're getting more activation out of it. We're getting more work on the releasing. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, kettlebells are great for like just laying on the bulb as well, getting into hip flexors.
Yep.
Or just like these little fucking devil balls, man.
Yeah.
Little cross balls like this. It's the shit.
Yep, absolutely. And that's the thing. When you do stuff like that, like kettlebells, using barbells, the edge of barbells, balls and stuff like that, they do more than just break up the muscle. They help break up the fascial fibers as well, help break up the skin a bit, so you can actually get more movement. Because even when your skin's bound, it can actually limit your mobility, even though your muscle's flexibility is still greater.
Yeah.
And that's why these things, movement's great, because it moves everything. It gets blood flowing going to it, because in the end, the blood is what helps us regain lengthen.
Cool. Any other big anatomy points you'd like to
Well, the one
about,
biggest thing,
big trouble area?
Flexors, a big trouble area, let's face it, especially us guys who do tons of running, is the ankle.
Mm-hmm.
And that is mainly because when we all think, oh, I need to improve ankle flexibility, we come at it from this point of view here, instead of actually looking at, so you look at, everyone focuses on the calf.
Yeah, the big gastrocnemius.
And hit the soleus as well. Everyone thinks of this posterior area, and nobody considers
like
the
the
frontal
anterior
area. So
tib
you got
and-
the extended digitorum longus and the tibularis anterior.
Yeah.
These things all come across the front of the foot, which then helps create that dorsiflexion, being able to pull the toes back. And then, of course, also you've even got under the foot.
Yeah.
But yet we all focus here because this is where we feel we are tight.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
one thing I like for
that's where you want to do stuff like that. Yeah.
Sorry. One thing I like for shin splints is like everyone knows
Okay.
calf raises where you stay on your toes and lift your heel, but I like putting your heels on like the end of a step and lifting your toes and doing toe raises and stretching, strengthening that anterior tib, and do that combined with your calf lengthening, then you got a party.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. Like that even helps with people who have trouble with squat motions, doing performance bodyweight squats, because
definitely.
You got to remember, even though gravity's pushing you down, it's still an active movement. This is where you need to focus on the pulling mechanism. So the hamstring's pulling you down, the ankle, the tibialis anterior actually pulling.
I'm gonna grab real quick. I'm gonna grab a shoe.
So yeah. And again, the other thing about mobility is you've got the joint movement itself. With all this blood flow, there is things like calcium buildup that can restrict your movement.
So you're talking about like squatting. Think about like lifting shoes. So to give people an idea of what's going on here, when you're doing a squat, and say you want to do a squat with good mobility, that's probably about the limit of how far I can go with a good back. But if if I've got lifters shoes, I can now hold this position with a straight back. So all that's changing here is that's about as far as I can go. I'm really tight in the anterior tib here. I'm tight in the calves.
Yep.
But if I elevate those heels, all of a sudden I can get I can get my chest up, right? That's basically what's happening. The difference between, say, these Vivos, which are a negative drop, or a big heel drop shoe, or like a lifter shoe, which has a really elevated heel for weightlifting. So that's why lifters exist, so that people can do squats with better mobility. Sorry to cut in there.
No, it's all good. That's exactly right. That's perfect. And
another question here, man. Wife always has QL problem. QL, quadratus lumborum, is one of the muscles sort of down your back, sort of where your kidneys are. Mobility is poor. How to strengthen? So QL is involved in a little bit of with your running as well. Let's see if Mick can find it.
There it is.
Our guy's fully nude now.
Yeah. Where is the QL? There we go. That's a bad boy.
QL.
That's your QL.
Mm-hmm.
The funniest thing about the QL, and this is again, you would be surprised how a lot of QL issues come from actually having too tight of a posterior chain. So actually too tight in the butt, not the right tightness you want, but actually your glutes are too tight and your hamstrings are too tight.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
When you do it, so what it is I'll just to give you an example. Right here, you can see how like you've got your glute muscles and stuff, and then you've got your glute max, which is this bad boy over the top here. All these fibers are pulling down, and the hamstrings here are also pulling down because they're all intertwined. And because those two muscles are quite great, they're like your two strong, biggest muscles and stuff. They are areas of muscles. They are pulling down constantly from being either one, sitting down too much, and it's causing a constant isolation, constant contraction of it. So it's actually limiting the range of motion on a daily basis for too long. So this is why sitting's so terrible. And that. with that pulling down, that actually follows up the rest of the chain. So that then goes up to the glutes, which then follows into a lot more of QL issues, which people have, because that is, as you saw how small that muscle was, but it's very important on the stability.
Yeah. So
when
it's
these
having to
muscles
do
are
more
tightened,
work when the glutes are weak.
so the glutes and hammies are probably just too strong. They need to be released.
Okay.
And so that would be the whole thing. The glutes and hammies are too strong, combined with the shortening of the hip flexors over here. It's actually causing the pelvis to actually slightly tilt.
Mm-hmm.
So what that is doing is the anterior, it's causing what they usually call it a posterior sort of drop. And that is causing a lengthening in the lower back region in the QLs,
mm-hmm.
while it's also, and the shortening in the hip region.
Yeah.
And this is what can actually go into mobility.
This is a very interactive lesson. Difference being
I'm loving
that is posterior.
Yeah.
So when you dump it into the lower back, whereas that. So I feel like taking a selfie for Instagram, you're going into anterior tilt.
Yeah. Perfect. And so that could be one of the big, those are several issues. And this is, again, with mobility, it comes from looking at your daily habits and daily structures. As I was just saying, I was standing on my roller, rocking back and forth, not just because it helps increase my foot mobility mechanics and recovers from all the running I do, but because I'm actively using my hips, it stops me from getting in this fixed position. Because even standing desks for a long time, having a standing desk isn't always a good thing if you don't actually have something to shift, because you can then get yourself into that anterior or posterior dumping, and again, we'll actually continue up the chain.
Do you follow a chick on Instagram? I think her name's Dr. Jen Fit or something like that. She's a pretty good IG influencer. She's probably got about 2 million followers, and she's a doctor. I'll bring up her thing. So she's a physio. That's her profile there. But she does really, really, really good shit. There's a couple of really good mobility people on IG. Movie is another amazing one. But this chick did a video, and I actually went and tagged my sister the other day in it, just because it's such a fucking good video, just about all different office chairs and chairs that allow you to tilt and move and change your position, and even like standing desk chairs that go up to the height, but they actually, like the chairs actually pivot to allow you to sort of move your position so you don't just get static all day. So, give her a follow, man.
That's a perfect example. Yeah, no, that's and that's a perfect example. When if you go for long drives and stuff like that, how stiff you feel just trying to get out of the car.
Think about the drive back from a Spartan race when you've just done all that contracting, and then you drive 8 hours and get out of the car and you fucking fall out like a tin man.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, what's the main takeaway here, guys? Get off your bum.
So.
All right, Corey just said thanks. This is why I was asking. I know where I have weaknesses using the knowledge you guys give to improve yourself. Awesome, man. Sounds like Mick answered your question while I was doing something. And Dave said video's fucked today. You'll have to watch later. No worries. I will pull my finger out one day and turn this into an audio podcast. But this is a very visual lesson today. There's nice pictures, and we're just looking straight at a dude's crotch.
Well, I can change it to a female if it's better.
Now it's gotten creepy. Just because it's Movember, Mick, we don't have to get creepy. That'll just happen naturally.
Oh, yes, with all those mustaches that are going to be going around. But basically the best takeaway is with your mobility hacking, the first thing you got to look at is the times you feel sore, and when you what's the cause and effect for, like, what are you doing over the daily? Because one other thing can be is due to a lot of people, some of us injured, like for me, I've smashed my ankle so many times. I know I've got some calcium buildups in there that I've had to use to try and move the joint. And this is where it comes onto a structural thing again.
It's almost like a scar tissue type thing.
Yeah. almost all can be undone. It's just like how you didn't get fat overnight and then have to expect to lose it the same way. Just like mobility, you didn't lose your mobility overnight.
Yeah. It took you 20 years to fuck yourself up. It's going to take you 5 years to unfuck yourself.
Some of it can be as just basically doing the schooling system and having to wear those terrible shoes and stuff like that. I mean, I still hate my nieces because they got that natural squat ability, but right now they make it effortless.
Yeah. Yeah. If you want to learn how to squat, guys, go and watch a toddler. They're amazing.
Yeah. But the other thing about your mobility is not everyone's mobility is the same. You actually can have a limited range of motion due to your genetics.
And they're like different limb lengths and stuff like that, you know. We're just put together different ways. Where, you know, some people have bigger hips, some people have long arms, some people have tiny fingers.
Yes. And that's the thing, like there's actually been studies that have shown that like you have like, so we all know about Asian squats and how they just squat so easily, effortlessly and stuff like that. And can have their legs together, like literally like that. Whereas most Western people have to sort of sprawl out a bit to get that even close to that depth.
Yeah.
That actually comes down to the genetic structure of our hip socket. So to show you what that bad boy is, let's strip the old fella down. Let's strip Pete down.
Pete.
So right here, this is one of the biggest things. He's bearing all. So right there at this point, Asians actually have been proven to have more of a shallower Asian background genetics has more of a shallower ball and socket joint, whereas Westerners and Celtic backgrounds have more of a deeper.
I'd imagine that's just natural selection, right? So the guys who could squat better, pass on the genes better, whereas you know the guys, well, it's probably not the right explanation, but basically if you say you come from a family of big drinkers, you're going to have a natural affinity to drinking a little bit more. Like it is passed on in that gene expression. So if you're coming from, you know, people that thousands of years have had great ability to people who don't squat like that, it's actually going to turn into the genetic code. Like your bodies change over time through generations.
Yeah, and absolutely. And just like we've talked about this entire thing, when you do, even with mobility, you will know if you feel good or not. You're the biggest experimenter on yourself. Okay.
Yeah.
You have to play with these and see what feels good. Don't go by someone else saying like you must go this depth.
No. I see that as a really big problem, that people who maybe get into running or get into something like CrossFit and they look up good technique and they're like, okay, I need to make my squat look exactly like that, or I need to run like Usain Bolt does. And it's, you know, you're different. You're never going to be the same. Go look at like the pro golf tour and look at all of their swings. They're all fucking different. I would have bought pretty fucking good.
Yeah, and that was one problem with CrossFit is when they set these standards, everyone must go to this and that. Now, for competition wise, that's understandable, but for your everyday person, and this is where I have trouble with some of the coaches I've met because they focus on you must have the standard, but some people are just not meant to go like, so let's take the squat. If you're doing a back squat or something, everyone says, you know, you've got to go below parallel when it comes to CrossFit stuff. But some people just cannot do that due to the fact of their structure. And
do you think that, you know, if you take somebody who can't do a proper squat now and give, you know, 5 years of work, that they would be able to get, you know, down past parallel with a squat? Like, do you think it can be changed over time, or are you just saying there's literally hard limits on what you can do?
It will depend on their structure. Some people we can get to that point, but in saying that, some people shouldn't either because of limb length and everything like that. So for me, I can go really low, but when I've got a barbell on my back, I have to cut that short because of my really long legs, because I've actually got a small torso and longer legs. For me to go butt to grass with a back squat means I give up my posterior chain and start getting that butt wing tuck under. And this is where it's
almost like jackknifing a trailer.
Absolutely.
You get stuck in the
And
hole
so
and you're fucked.
you don't, without lifters, I would not reach that point. And this is where you can, again, it will come down to the structure. Some people can get closer to parallel, but some people also don't need it for parallel. Like the biggest example is field athletes who, rugby and stuff like that. It doesn't really matter how low you squat because you don't get yourself in a deep position to sort of attack. You're always about 90 at the lowest. Generally, it's only like 45 degrees in or something like that when you're moving around. So you don't want to get, even like a union, stuff like that, you don't want to get that low. And this is where you've got to look at functioning for a purpose still as well.
Yeah. So now you're talking specificity.
Yeah.
And
mobility is the same. Yeah. Sure. So I got that.
I was actually talking to a concreter today. I ran a boot camp out at EMF for Spartans, and I was talking to a guy, young fella, pretty strong, but his mobility was fucked. And I was like down in a malasana, like a yogi squat, the Chinese construction site worker squat that we see, and he was just like, "Fuck, man, I can't do that." And he like tried to squat, and he was like right on his toes. And he's a concreter, and he said, my back's always sore on this. And he said, I'll be 40 and I'll be fucked. Like I won't be able to do this anymore. I said, well, have a look. Like you've got to start moving. Like you're doing a lot of strengthening stuff, but you're not doing any lengthening, and you're just becoming a bundled fucking, tight ball of mess. And I said, look at the Asian guys who on the construction site who are like 80-year-old tilers, and they're fucking, down in squats tiling and on their knees, and they're still going. Whereas, the guys, the Caucasian guys who don't do these squats and don't go through these movement patterns, they're fucked by the time they're 50. So it's a testament to how, we're supposed to move like this. We just fucking don't, and we forget.
Yeah, absolutely. And that can also come down to a lifestyle thing. When you're doing what does the rest of that day look like? What is your home life? Is it sitting on a chair and that, or is it hanging out in the squat position, chilling out, eating? I know for me, one trick I always use to sort of help me. Yeah. Well, I do it for my morning coffee. When I have my coffee, if I want to enjoy it, I sit there in the squat position. So I'm going to have my coffee in this position. Yeah. So I can just get used to being comfortable in there. A few times I have to keep standing up because my body's not completely comfortable there, but yeah.
I do it in the sauna at EMF after workouts. I just sit in that yogi squat and just sort of over like 5-6 minutes, you'll just sink and sink and sink and sink, and eventually my bum will hit the floor, and I'm like, oh,
yeah, good. Absolutely.
But yeah, it takes a while. It takes a long time, and that's like that's pretty much yin style yoga, when you just hold a pose for that long and just let your body give. It's cool. All right. Any other big anatomy points you want to talk about now?
No, I think I'm happy with the anatomy. I think there's got plenty in there. Just that little dude.
No. Pete?
Sorry, was that?
No, I said, how's Pete?
Yeah, so that
our model.
Yeah, Pete, he's done. He's happy. He's done. We'll get rid of Pete.
Are we done with Pete?
Yeah, he'll be fine. Right. We can be done with Pete.
Bye, Pete. Cool. All right. So we were talking about another point that I wrote down, where the pain is might not be where you're tight. We did sort of touch on it. Is there anything else you want to sort of add to that sort of area?
So yeah, basically with it, and this is where it gets really confusing because it can be localized, but it can also be a referral pain. So one little thing I will do when I used to massage is if I would hit the back, this infraspinatus, which is basically just around the shoulder blade area. If I would hit on that point there,
that actually
you would actually feel pain.
External rotation, doesn't it?
Yeah, you would feel pain in the front. Yeah. And that would depending on how severity, it can actually tingle all the way down to your hand. This is where pain you've got.
Sorry, man. That could be where Corey's talking about front of delts.
Yeah.
Which could be, those rotator cuff muscles on the back, just pulling everything back and around.
Well, you can even see, like, with his profile pic there, you can see how sloping down and forward the shoulders are and how much he's bringing in that forward. Just by looking at it, you can just see, like, how those shoulders are coming down forward. It's activating this lengthening in the trap as well.
Mhm.
And that, I mean, that might have been just him before a race, just chilling out, getting ready, or that just might be his natural position. And one thing people can do to sort of figure out to test themselves is look where you place your hands. So if you relax and then just sit there and you look down at your hands, if they're not like that beside your body, but they're more like this, that shows where we're getting tight. That shows where we're
So
actually
you're
tight.
talking like,
So these are examples.
are your hands like that, or do they naturally sit like that, or even maybe like that?
Yeah.
Like, where do they just naturally fall? Mine definitely sort of lean towards my shoulder. My shoulder's rotating in. Naturally, that's sort of where they sit.
Yeah, and that's a sign that, you know, as I pointed to you at the boot camp, yeah, you've got a little bit of round in the chest, which, as I talked to you about your lifestyle as well, it's understandable. Because you do a lot of work on the computer. Yeah. I mean, also doing your burpees and pull-ups is going to cause a little more on that because they're both hitting muscles that actually have the same insertion point as well. And this is why it's always funny where they, you know, people used to say, all right, we're going to just do pull-ups and push-ups, pull-ups and push-ups. And then because it's even though it's a chest and back movements, where the insertion points are is the same thing. And that's what causes more pulling.
So you want to be doing like rows.
That's always funny.
Re-delt stuff.
Yeah, inverted rows where you're laying under and stuff like that. Yeah. And that's what I mean. This is where people fall under that whole, oh, I'm tight here, it must be this. It's not always the case. And you can always tell by the severity of it. If it feels like a dull raw, 9 times out of 10, that actually is coming from like something else. If it's quite acute where it feels like it's really piercing right at the top, that's usually a point of where it could be the area.
And is it like understanding the agonist-antagonist sort of relation between muscles is going to go a long way with helping? And what I mean by that is you have like mover and you have an opposing mover that's, so muscles always act in pairs, right? Easiest to explain on the bicep. When the bicep is acting like and working and shortening, it's bringing that hand up. For that to be allowed to happen, the tricep has to lengthen to facilitate that. Now, when I'm going the other way and doing like a skull crusher or a tricep exercise, my tricep is now contracting, my bicep has to lengthen. So that's sort of where we're talking. These muscles work in opposing muscle groups.
Absolutely.
So agonist, antagonist. So that's where, you know, if you're getting, you know, tight anterior delts or chest, we try and find what's the opposing thing that we can work, strengthen while we release that. And that's where you're saying, you know, the relationship between doing burpees and pull-ups is not, because they're not like opposing.
Yeah.
So I'd be better off hitting a one board or something.
No. Yeah. Absolutely. And another example, so the best way you can always test this, so it's always like, okay, so how do you figure this out? Your posture will tell you. So just as you were doing with the bicep and that, if you know, like, if this is tight, you'll find out because when you relax and just fully relax, that will be your resting position. Yeah. If you've ever seen, like, CT Fletcher is a perfect example. He's even said, he's literally gotten on there saying he cannot fully extend his elbows.
Because his biceps
and
is so
it's understandable.
Because he's
because he's been doing so many bicep curls. He's got so many records of bicep curls and world championships with doing bicep curls and stuff like that. And I mean, you have a look at his arms; they're just huge.
Oh, yeah.
That's a perfect example of that. He's weak in the tricep, but he's also so freaking tight in the bicep.
It's an imbalance.
I know. And so your body's position will tell you more than what the pain is, than just the pain alone.
And it's my understanding that pretty much nothing good comes from imbalances. So if I find a client with an imbalance, I'm like, well, let's fix that shit. You know, if I find a client who's way stronger on their right arm than their left arm, I'm going to be doing a little bit more work on their left side. I'm going to try and match that up. Because anytime we have imbalances, anytime there's not really symmetry in the body, it's going to present. It's going to present in a joint problem. It's going to present in some sort of fucking issue. You know, the big strong muscles destroy the weak ones. It's not good.
Absolutely.
Just tried to pull my leg up again and got that exact same cramp. It's like I learned nothing at all.
Yep.
All right.
And yeah, that's
any big other areas that you would talk about for, say, you know, where the pain is might not be where you're tight? Any other big sort of trouble areas that you see on people really common?
Well, we did target the hip flexors a bit. That is a big, massive one. And again, that can come from movement issues. But the other problem people have with these mobility stuff is doing too much of it and not then using it, or as well.
What do you mean? So like doing too much, say,
example,
lengthening without doing the strengthening?
Yes. Or actually using the lengthening to go into a strengthening exercise that still causes them, they still need some bound up pressure. As I talked about with the powerlifters, so for me, I used to spend half an hour like easily trying to get into my ankle mobility before I'd go into a squat session. Do the hips, do the ankles, all that sort of things I would think would do it. The problem with this is it's like anything. When you do too much of it,
become a bit hypermobile.
It can have you become hypermobile, but it could also actually just cause you a lot more irritation as well. And that thing brings on the inflammation and stuff like that, which can actually then cause more damage after the exercise has been done. When you're doing strength-bound exercises, range of motion is great. You want to have it, but you don't want to go into a heavy session with just creating some new motion, because your body will then not be ready for it. It's like suddenly, well, we've all seen it, people who stand still and then go, okay, you're now going to do a 100-meter sprint. 9 times out of 10, people get a hammy issue because they're just gone from 0 to 100.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing if you do too much mobility and then go into actually activate it, because it's not used to this big range of motion. Yeah. And if you've done static mobility where you've just rolled it out and smashed it, it's suddenly going to try and contract, and it's like, this just doesn't feel right, and that can cause way more issues.
So, and I've definitely seen from numerous places, and I wanted to do a little bit of research before today to find specific studies, but time got away from me, talking about runners doing like extensive stretching before an event, how that can actually counter performance and increase injury rate by stretching too much before the event, especially static stretching, which is quite different to sort of, you know, a dynamic warm-up. And it's basically for the reasons that you've just said, like you're creating a little bit too much mobility in the range, you're doing it cold.
Yep.
And, you know, then as soon as you're going, you're not allowing the body to warm up, and you're just trying to go as hard at the edges of the range, and that's when you're tearing shit.
Yeah. And it actually goes into a little deeper. So you've got like the Golgi tendon and the muscle spindle. These things are at those insertion points we're talking about in the muscles. These things are directly connected to your central nervous system to help you measure. Like they send out different chemicals and stuff to measure your lengthenings and contraction, so it knows how to, one, cause either a cramp or something. We think there's going to be a tear, and protect the muscles more. But once you do that, it's like when people do the Wim Hof breath, they suddenly switch off a signal in the brain that says, hey, you're going to be out of oxygen, and it can go a lot longer. This is the same thing on a muscle, on the cellular level of the muscle. You can actually, it starts switching that off, and it doesn't actually know how long it's got. And because of that, you're then overusing the muscle, and cause greater tears because it doesn't know where its limits are.
So, and you can do this. You can trick the brain by doing things like PNF stretching, so proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. If you haven't heard of that or seen anyone do that, it's fucking amazing. I used to take clients through it pretty regularly, and it's basically what you're doing is you're bypassing that inhibitor in your brain that's saying, I can't let that muscle loosen up, because if I do it wrong, I'm going to get injured. But in the right setting, it can be a really good mobility tool to create flexibility and mobility. This PNF stretching. Do you do much of it, Mick?
Yeah, I use, with all my clients myself, I use PNF stretch, and combined with a breath protocol of 4-4-8. So 4 inhale,
So
4
you're
hold where you
keeping
contract the
them.
muscle, and then an 8 exhale. Yeah. But again, it's great as long as it's done after a sesh. You wouldn't go into a pre-sesh, pre-sesh because, as you said, we're switching off the body's ability.
100%.
And post mobility is another issue people forget after. They do some mobility and stretching afterwards, and they're just like, I'm good, I'm fine. And they go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
And your body doesn't get to know where this new range is, doesn't get to feel it. And it's like anything else. You got to go there to actually know it's there. And that's so when you release the muscle, it's always good to go for some movement again, walk around, even do a few bodyweight squats, actively using the body more, because then the body muscle starts seeing that they've got this, it can register its new area of range of motion. And that's how you can actually create change that actually stays with you rather than doing your stretching, ability going straight to bed and then waking up and realizing everything's just gone back to its default setting of too freaking tight.
Yeah, I always explain it that if you just stretch the muscles and then have a bit of too much time, they're just going to elasticize back to where they were. Whereas if you and then strengthen in that new range, you're going to create permanent, flexibility and mobility changes.
Absolutely.
What else have we got? Overdoing it. Let's talk about overdoing it. Okay. Can you stretch too much? Comfortable position. A bit antsy today. What's going on?
Well, perfect example of overdoing it. Have you ever tenderized a meat? Got a steak and got a meat tenderizer to tender it, make it nice and soft.
Yeah.
And if you overdo that, it ends up becoming this ball of mush or ground beef almost. That's exactly the same thing you're doing to your muscles when you're hitting at it constantly. And that you're literally breaking them down. I mean, if you ever gone to a massage and suddenly you come out and you're like, oh my God, I feel so sore. I feel like they might have bruised me or something.
Okay.
That's exactly what you're doing on your mobilities and stuff like that. It's exactly the same thing, is that you're creating the range of motion by allowing the muscle fibers to move. But when you keep bashing them, it's no different than if you just said, okay, I'm going to do nothing but front squats, no back squats, no deadlifts. And then next thing you know, your quads are just destroyed. They're huge, but they're destroyed. You can't friggin' move them anymore because they're just constantly tight. This is working in the opposite way, this is exactly the same way, but working on a different way. Instead of lengthening, we're now just causing them to be tenderized and soft, which is then losing their ability to contract.
So they're becoming less, I guess, pliable. That's the word I'm looking for. I think that's it. I think I had a better way I wanted to put that, but it just didn't happen.
Yeah, and this is why it's always good to set markers, just like you do with your training. If I'm going to take this long to train, your mobility should be the same. No more like 2 minutes on. I usually set an example for my clients. I usually give them, like, if you're going to do something, no more than 2 minutes on each body part, because anything more is just going to cause you a lot more issues.
See, I'm inclined to disagree a little bit with you there, in that I do a fair bit of yoga where we'll hold positions for 4 or 5 minutes. But what will happen, and that's where you're getting into your fascia and your connective tissue and your joints, but it's very important that you don't push hard while you're doing that. Like, it's different to like a P&F stretch where you are applying force, whereas yin is passive, but it'll almost be painful at times. Like if you go down into a yogi squat and stay there for 5 minutes, it's going to be fairly fucking uncomfortable. But it's important that it doesn't get too uncomfortable. So if you can't maintain control of your breath, if you can't keep nasal breathing, that way I know you're calm. If you can't smile, you're doing yin wrong. So I think you can definitely be in those positions for a long period of time, but you can't push too hard for a long period of time. That's when you fuck yourself up. So
but again,
at the start. Sorry.
Yeah. But as you said there, you're in a passive setting. That's that's more on the flexibility side rather than focusing on those. Because even though I've done yoga squats.
Yeah, I would say like this. is not super passive. Like gravity's doing a fair bit there. You're not getting pushed down, but over time, that'll just loosen up. I can feel my hip flexors screaming, my glutes, the front of my legs are screaming. But in 5 minutes' time, I'll be a little bit further down than what I am now. I wouldn't say that's super passive, but you've got to respect your limits, right? If you're pushing into pain or pins and needles, you can fuck yourself up doing it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, that's also what I'm talking about is more of like using a ball or a kettlebell, because that's now creating an external force.
Cool.
When you're using mobility and stretching external force, where we're applying, whereas what you've got is more of a internal force. You're using the natural bodies and stuff like that. And again, I mean, my wife says squats, but I agree with you too, because when I heard that squat, it's not completely passive for me. But I can relax into it. But whereas if you're lying on that kettlebell, if I got you to do that for 5 minutes, that kettlebell exercise, that's going to cause a whole different sort of issues.
So it's
and this is where again.
It's having limits, and you definitely need to have limits, right? You can't just go like if somebody starts with me as a client and they say, Matt, I want to be able to run a 50K ultra. I'm not doing any running now. What should I do? The worst thing you can do is go and run 50Ks because your body's going to fucking break. So we need to start building some volume. We need to start building some strength, some mobility into joints. We need to make sure we're recovering as we increase that volume. So we might start you running 5Ks a week, 6Ks a week, or walking or jogging. And then over time, we're going to add 10%, 20%, letting our body adapt. So stretching's the same. What you're saying is basically you can't just go fucking bang into stretching because you're gonna blow up.
Absolutely. And that's why most people who do their first yoga session just find it extremely intense.
Yeah. I've seen people cry in yoga in the end. I reckon the emotions come out of your hips and your joints. I don't know about that. I just reckon.
Actually, yeah, I can definitely relate to that one. When I used to work with the Youth Justice doing programs for them, I actually did a whole yogi session there because I was doing 6-7 sessions of yogi a day there. I came out and just felt so overwhelmed and literally emotional from the constant stretches of the hips. So I can actually say I've felt that of overdoing the hip stretches.
I hear it a lot. I've heard it in a lot of yoga, like in classes, that people will say you go into like your big hip openers, you go into like a hip stretch for 5 minutes, and it's releasing all those toxins out of the joints, and it fucking fucks with your head. Like it's going to bring up repressed memories and shit. I haven't had it happen, but yeah, it's common enough.
Mate, you're missing out. You're missing out. It's an interesting sensation to go through. I'm not going to lie.
Have we? We've still got a couple of people on. Have we got any more questions today, guys? Everyone's just stopped commenting. Everyone's just creeping now. We're the only creepers.
I've never known them to be so quiet.
Yeah, maybe they're just digesting it all, taking it all in. So you can overdo it. We took our nude model off screen and they've all just fucked off. So you can overdo it. Okay.
Yep.
How would you know if you're overdoing it?
Well, the biggest example would be you'd get injured when you did something. You'd feel the muscle tear. That's a big example. Like that's an extreme one.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing you could find is perfect example is when you're going into some strength training, sometimes you might lift a weight that feels very comfortable for you. And now all of a sudden it feels really hard to move. Like you can hit the position, but you can't contract as well. So it just feels like what would normally be about 50, 60% almost feels like a 1RM for you. That is a big example of that you've gone too far and your muscle now just can't effectively contract anymore as well.
That's
you've gone a little too hard for that sesh. Yeah.
Cool. We do have some questions rolling in. Marie, is there anything I can do with mobility to help with bursitis in my shoulder? Yes, lots. Mick?
Plenty. So, I mean, the one thing you're going to have to do is look how you do certain exercises. So one of the biggest issues that I dealt with when it came to bursitis is the fact that people don't activate their thumbs when they're grabbing onto things. So a lot of bursitis, I've known it from coming from the CrossFit scene, working with a lot of CrossFitters and functional fitness scene. A lot of people adopted that thumb over the top hook.
Yeah.
Now, when you don't activate your thumb by grabbing around, it actually disengages some of the smaller muscles around the shoulder girdle, which then puts a lot more volume through just the lat. And in a controlled setting, it's not a bad thing. But when you start doing those jumping pull-ups with kippies and stuff and butterflies, because that is a constant amount of volume, and kipping and butterflies push almost 2 to 3 times your body weight of volume, that gives that really big overworking in the tendon, which then causes the bursitis issues.
Yeah.
So one
and it is
thing
mostly an overuse thing, and it will go away with rest, but they certainly can be triggered by a couple of imbalances or trying to force a range of motion that your body's just not happy with.
Yeah. So the best thing you can actually do is, one, rest it. Doing stuff where you're lying down, some pronated rows where you're lying down and pulling the scap back. Matt, just focusing on scap retraction. Going into when you eventually find you can get overhead movement, grabbing onto the overhead and doing some, again, scap retractions, not actually pulling up, but adopting a full circle grip.
Okay. I do that a bit. I go my hands over the top of the bar pretty regularly. But I don't get bursitis either. So.
But you're not doing big kip and pull-ups and doing hundreds and hundreds of volumes on them,
Yeah. It's been a while since I've done a Murph, but I am doing. I'm doing this little workout as part of my reset. I'm doing 25 pull-ups every day, which I thought I was going to have more problems with. Just from 0 to every day and 5 minutes burpees every day, and I thought it was going to have more problems than I am. I'm just slowing it down. Have you got anything specific where you can do with her shoulder for bursitis, Nick?
Yeah, as I was saying, the dead hang, stuff like that, releasing around that chest region and focusing on strengthening the mid-back, lower traps and stuff like that to get that whole stronger back feeling.
Cool. Sean's saying I'm just getting some tissues ready for our yoga session. He's joining me at 6 p.m. tonight in the 28-day reset group for the 60-minute stretch session Q&A. Kerry. Partially torn supraspinatus tendon 7 months ago. Most pain gone in the area, but pain along in a bicep that I was told was referred pain. Really tender. Any thoughts, Mr. Swift? I'm pretty out on that. It's real specialist for me. I would, if I had a client with that, I'd probably be saying, speak to a physio, and then I would be going and getting on Google Scholar or just getting into my heaps of books and stuff that I have on sports injuries and anatomy and trying to work out what's going on there. Off the top of my head, I can't answer it. Nick?
Well, personally, for me, I'd have to actually, I first would want to see how the person moves, see how she's moving and all that sort of stuff, and how to diagnose that a lot better, get a feel of it. But yeah, it's really hard. I don't want to touch that one too much because again, that issue with the bicep and that is, it can be a lot of things. It can actually be sort of like too much tension in the bicep might be overworked. It could also be an issue from maybe too much rotational work, not enough stabilizing. But again, with and as I said, the supraspinatus, having that, I would tell you, you've probably developed some overworked muscles and you sort of need to strengthen that to help support it a little more now after the first. But again, it'd have to come down to actually seeing it.
Sharon, great info. Thanks so much. Too much hour on listening to you guys. Learned so much. Good to hear. And Andrew. Andrew's a repeat offender on our chats. Spartan rings and monkey bars. I use loose thumbs, which cause bursitis issue over 6 months. Fixed a cortisone injection, physio exercises. Yeah. So you've done exactly the right thing there for treatment. You've got some cortisones, taken the inflammation out of the joint, so that you can now work and move the joint, and then you've strengthened and done the exercises that the physio has given you to actually fix the problem. Whereas if you're just going and getting cortisone and then not changing anything about your routine, it's still fucking band-aid. It's the same thing as getting a massage or just getting a chiro to reset you, but you're not fixing the postural problems that was causing your back to fucking go at. So awesome work there. And Kerry's saying have an appointment on Tuesday. Thanks. No worries at all. Anything else, Nick? Any other big topics? We're sort of on about 80 minutes.
But the more natural you can keep the movements, the better it will be for your mobility. So for the bursitis people and stuff like that, one little trick I've always given people is doing an active hang and then slowly bringing my legs from a straight leg to a bend, to a tuck position in front of me.
Sure. Like a hanging knee
Reason
raise.
for this? Yeah. Reason for this is it sort of gives you the chance to sort of go from an upright position, like where you might be a little out like this from your bad range of motion, tucking the body and activating the mid back as well. So going back and forward like that, when you slowly move your knees, will actually not only cause a nice lengthening in the spine, but because our shoulders are actually because we can carry a lot of load, we just don't do stuff where we hang anymore. This will help it.
I've actually got I think we spoke about it before, but I've got a book sitting here, which I still haven't read. And it was Ross Edgley spoke about it in his book. He's the first guy to swim around Britain. And he talks about this acromial humeral joint, which is basically that, which is like a new joint that is when your arm is here and the humerus is now touching the acromion complex, whatever that's called. Name's escaping me. And it's, the theory comes from we evolved in trees, right? We evolved in trees and we were swimming around. Now we don't do it anymore. I don't reckon there's any monkeys with shoulder pain. There's a couple of really good like movement specialists who really advocate dead hanging daily for shoulder health. And that's
Ido Patel's one of them. Ido Patel says 5 minutes a day.
7, I think. Ido, he's a fucking wicked dude. If you're after just somebody who does some amazing shit on Instagram, social media, look up Ido Patel. He's one of his students. So he runs a gym called Movement Israel or something like that. One of his students, Roy Gold, is fucking unbelievable. Like, do you follow that guy, Nick?
Yeah, that dude's like exceptional.
Man, he's fucking out of control. You know what? I'm gonna see if I can find a video that I can show guys. This is just the first one.
He's like a giant.
Found. Man, fucking big dude. But look at how fucking mobile this guy is. So fucking strong. Now I'm just showing you guys Instagram videos. This is amazing live TV. Yeah, like, he's a big fucking guy. Another guy who I want to definitely want to talk about, because a lot of people think that you can be big but you can't be limber. And that's a pretty common misconception. A lot of big bodybuilders are tight. And a lot of people think that if you're going to get that big, it comes at a sacrifice to your mobility and flexibility. You would know Juji Mufu?
Yep.
Dude's a fucking weapon.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and find a video of him. What's it? This dude who's a bodybuilder.
Oh, well, see, I mean, yeah. I know exactly
he's just
being
fucking
big and
incredible, man.
I mean, I had to laugh because the amount of times I've won a bet because I've broken out and been able to do the splits and people not think someone my size should be doing that.
It's impressive, man. It's impressive.
It's always been fun.
I know. I started yoga probably 18 months, maybe even like 2 years ago now, and I used to be just tight as fuck everywhere. I'm still tight, but I'm way better than I was. And the difference in performance, the difference in my recovery, my injury rates, everything just gets better as you get more mobile and more flexible.
Yeah, well, look at the boot camp we did. How funny was it? I mean, people were looking at me going, how the hell are you doing that when I was doing some of the stretches? And they're just like,
oh, yeah.
I mean, it was funny because they were like, inside, they're like, oh, this is killing. And it's like, it shouldn't be. It's an easy stretch. And they were just, there were some much smaller people than me that just couldn't even get anywhere near the range I was. And that's because it's practice. It's working the muscle regularly, just like strength training.
Time, right? It's time. I'm in a hurry to get anywhere. Jimmy Bullard, my chiro keeps me standing and walking and running. Yeah, definitely. Carrying,
absolutely,
cutting, etc. Yeah. And anything else to add, Mick? What's a takeaway somebody can take away from this chat to start down the road of increasing and improving their mobility?
Well, as I just said then, time. This didn't happen overnight to you. It's not going to return overnight easy. So be patient. Focus on elements at a time. Don't be just like one spot. Keep it the whole body. Listen to how your body feels. You'll know the difference between what feels like a good trigger point that you might be releasing using a kettlebell or in a stretch to something that is damaging. Okay? The more you can relax through this, the better the results will be for you, rather than thinking of how much I got to suffer through it.
So definitely like down regulate, try and keep control of your breath.
Yeah.
If you want more information on that, we did an earlier episode of Harder to Kill talking all about breath that you can check out at the YouTube channel or probably in the my Onemoorerep page videos. So get over, check it out.
Yep. But those would be your best takeaways for it. I think that's all you. Those would be your best ones, and more consistency will outdo. Just if you're more consistent with little work, will be a lot better than being very inconsistent with bigger work.
Yeah, I say that to all my clients. I would rather you work at 75%, 365 days of the year, than give me a 100%, but you burn out every 2 months.
Yep.
And get injured. Consistency is key. Cool. All right, Mick. Man, thanks for the chat today. You definitely took the lead today. Do we have an idea about content for next week? What topic we're going to talk about?
Not too sure just yet. I think we'll need brainstorm because I know we want to put gut later on, but I think I want to do something else planned.
Yeah, not gut. I need time to read some shit.
Yeah.
And it's not an area I'm super passionate about, so I've got to sort of fucking make myself do it. I think we're definitely going to do gut health after the challenge because I've just got a little bit on my plate at the moment. Jim, you've said something that I really want to bring up here that's super important. I recommend using both a chiro and a physio together. Chiro realigns things that are out, and physio helps keep you there, like the difference between having new tyres installed or wheel balance and a wheel alignment. Yeah, 100%. And a lot of people make the mistake of just fixing the immediate problem. So getting the massage, getting the fucking chiro, getting orthotics in the shoes, whatever it is. They just fix the immediate problem and they don't look at the causation of where that problem occurred and how it occurred. And if you eliminate the problem, you take away the thing that's actually going wrong. So if you're using a chiro and a physio, I assume your physio's got you doing strengthening and lengthening. And actually, I would hope you wouldn't need a chiro eventually. But sometimes it's good to just have somebody there to keep you on track. And look, most athletes that I know, like professional athletes, they have chiros, physios, they have a whole team of people that keeps their shit working. Andrew saying thanks, Dora saying thanks. No worries, guys. All right, we'll work out a topic and we'll come back. Anything for you this week, Mick, that you want to plug while we got these lovely people?
Just the breath program again. That's gone live this week. So basically, I've got an early bird special, and then it fully starts up in 2 weeks. So you can get your spot in, and where we target breath. And how
definitely send Mick a message. Is there a website or a funnel or anything, or do you want them to just message you direct?
So you can go. It's on my website. If you go to uncaged.live, you can access it there. Or if you want, hit me up on my various socials, and I can send it to you. Uncaged.live. Yes.
Done. Get over to that. Yeah, cool. Anything else, Mick, from you?
No, that's it. And otherwise, if you've got any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me and Matt. If you've got any ideas of what you want to hear, give us some info. Give us some ideas of what questions you might have. We can see where we can look up the next thing for you as well.
Definitely. If you want to drive a specific topic that you want us to talk about, message us, comment. We can go down some rabbit holes. I'm going to be going live on Spartan Australia's Facebook page in 28 minutes, talking all about the Ultra. So it's going to be all things Ultra, which means I need to get my gear list together and set up the camera in the kitchen. So join me for that, guys. And then if you are in my 28-day reset, we're going to be straight out of the Spartan live into the live yoga at 6 p.m. Queensland time. So join me for that, guys. And aside from that, heaps of thanks for rolling in. Sam saying thanks, Sean.
Yep.
Jimmy Bullard, love your work. We love your work too, big fella. And Kerry saying thank you both. No worries. All right, we'll end it there. See you guys.